Hey, hello, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. And today we have the fantastic Amy Jo Kim. Amy, are you prepared to engage?
Yes.
Let's do this. Amy has a background in neuroscience, computer science, and psychology. She's a part game designer, part community architect. She has been participating in things like Rock Band, The Sims, Ultima Online, eBay, Family.com, NewYorkTimes.com, Indiegogo.com, and numerous startups. She's pretty well known for her book in 2000 called Community Building on the Web and her work applying game design to the web and mobile services. She holds a Ph.D. in Behavioral Neuroscience from the University of Washington, and she is an adjunct game design professor at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. So Amy, that's a mouthful, and there's, I'm sure, many more things that we could say about your fantastic work, but we will do that through the interview. And the first thing that we would like to know, Amy, is how does a regular, if there's any kind of a regular day for you, look like?
My days tend to be quite different, but it depends on the phase of work I'm in. So recently, I've been juggling several projects. So a typical day might be getting up early before the kids are up, getting my coffee, maybe having an early meeting with one member of my team. I have a distributed team. There's someone in Colorado, there's someone in Amsterdam, there's someone in Singapore. So I might meet with a member of my team about something we're doing. And then I would have some online meeting with clients. After I got my daughter off to school, I would hop onto Zoom, have some online meeting with clients where we're reviewing work we're doing together. I might have a lunch out of the office with someone I want to be in touch with, someone who's coming through town, wants to meet up, wants advice. In the afternoon, more online meetings. Occasionally, I might go to see a client or go somewhere, but a lot of my day is spent working with people all over the world, my team and my clients, but from my home office. We probably walk the dog in between that, have dinner with my family, and maybe go to a school event that evening or watch a movie together, do something together with my family in the evening. And then very occasionally I might be up later, again, meeting with someone in a different time zone. But I'm usually in bed pretty early and then up early. And I am pretty grateful every week that I get to have that kind of work style. It really works for me.
Yeah, that's the fundamental thing, and it sounds like it's a very balanced life, which is something that is fundamental for many people. And I might consider myself somebody who finds that very, very important as well. So having time with your family, having time to relax a bit, and doing all these things, and doing it from home, if that's something that you like, it's fantastic.
It is, and admittedly, there are times when I'm working 12 or 14-hour days. Recently, I taught a class at Stanford through the continuing studies, so it was for working adults, on game thinking. And every Tuesday night, I was going to teach the class, and that was hard because I have those times carved out. But it was worth it because I met some amazing people and made their lives a lot better. So that was very gratifying.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase of live your life through experiences, because in the end, it's the only thing you'll get to keep in the long run. So if it was a great experience, it's always worth it.
Yeah, it was. I'm just not going to be doing it again anytime soon.
That makes sense. Amy, we would like to start with a question that we always start with. And it's the first question about your experience. And it's what we'd like to call a favorite failure when creating, a game or creating some engaging product that actually, maybe set you up for future learning or for future success, or maybe just a low point that you had a lot of learning from. What would that look like? Tell us the whole story. And you don't have to name any names, and not to make anybody feel guilty about it. So.
Yeah. So there was a failure that the company ended up pivoting from. The company didn't go out of business, but it was a failure of understanding and process that absolutely educated me and also educated that client. And it was a brilliant startup I was working with, really smart young founder, had success at Facebook and Google, and had raised quite a bit of initial seed money. And we were working together toward their MVP, minimum viable product, first playable, first ship. You can call it different things. And by the way, an MVP is a liquid, not a solid. It's not just one thing. So we're working together to shape their first thing that they're going to have people use. And this particular founder had come really out of product marketing. That had been where he had gotten accolades. And whenever we were going to show any graphics at all, any UX test, any concept test at all to potential customers, he wanted the graphics to be beautiful and polished and really look shippable. And he was very attached to beautiful, polished graphics. And when you're working hard to find the right first MVP, which is really the nugget of value that you can build and test quickly within your overall vision, when you're working hard to find that, polished graphics will get in your way if you're iterating quickly, because they're much harder to iterate. The team gets much more attached to them when they polish them, etc. I've written about this extensively. And when I went into this project, the CEO I was working with told me, I trust you. I'm going to follow your process. You're the boss. We really need to get this done quickly. All my friends tell me you know how to do that, etc. But then when push came to shove, he just couldn't bear for the graphics I'm talking about early play tests of 10 or 12 different people. He couldn't bear for those to not have polished graphics. And it dramatically slowed us down. And so as we were trying to iterate our way through this, he got very frustrated and really wanted to just ship something into the App Store that was basically the onboarding of the experience without the core loop, the 21-day experience that pulls you back, which I call a learning loop. And he just really wanted to ship something. He had told his board he was going to ship something by a certain date, and he just really wanted to do it. So what happened was, as we were working our way through trying to test the core learning loop and get that ready, he hired someone else, another designer, and just took like the first steps of onboarding, like signing up for the thing, and made a really beautiful version of it with really, really pretty graphics and pretty imagery and all that. That was just the onboarding. And said, I really want to ship this. And I said to him, everything I've learned has told me that if you do that, you will be shipping a leaky bucket. And he said, well, I think it's really good. I think we'll learn a lot. There's stats and, all these gurus are saying I should just ship and learn. And I don't really understand why you're keeping me from doing that. So we had a disagreement. And I said, let's see what's Let's see what's going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong. Turns out I wasn't wrong. So for me, it was really painful because there was this sort of domino effect of beliefs about how you build a product effectively that I had a difference with my client. And I consider it a real failure on my part that I wasn't able to find the language and find the metaphor and find the way to convince him that if we used very simple graphics for our quick iteration stage of what we were doing, we would get much further faster and we would be able to ship something that wasn't a leaky bucket. And since that time, which was, quite a few years ago at this point, since that time, I have gotten much, much better at coming to that crossroads with a client and not just throwing up my hands and saying, but thinking, okay, what's their world? What's their metaphor? What's the thing that I can invoke that's really going to help them? Like, what breadcrumbs can I put down to lead them toward the moment, toward the realization that I need them to have? Sometimes you just have to make a mistake. But that was painful for me because it was an incredibly cool idea, and it was like watching a slow motion train wreck. And it also was, something that, the idea that what you should do is always put polished looking graphics in front of potential customers. That's an idea that you'll hear now and again. You'll hear that in some of the Google Ventures, that 5-day sprint. The last day has very, very polished graphics in front of people. The reality is sometimes if you're testing the UX, or you're testing certain people, that can be absolutely the right thing to do. If you're early in the process, it's the wrong thing to do. It gives you a really different kind of feedback because it looks done than you'll get if you show people things that are much more obviously not done. So one of the really 3 core ideas in game thinking, which I know we'll talk about later, is the different stages of prototyping and testing and what it makes sense to do at which stage, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that's one of the things that the world of gamification can really absorb, because it's really helpful to have concrete guidance about how to save, months of time.
Yeah, definitely.
But here's the thing, you also have to have stakeholder buy-in, which brings me back to you need to be able to convince and sell the stakeholders who are supporting this and funding this that in fact this is the right way to do things. And that was where I failed with the startup. And we've mended fences, we're on good terms, but I really consider it my failure of communication that I let that happen.
It's funny that we're precisely talking about this because yesterday I was giving within my department I was giving a workshop, and one of the things that I'm fighting, not fighting, I'm struggling to get through is the idea of iteration and getting something that, as just exactly as you said, is not beautiful, polished, and final graphics ready to be shipped. That's not an iteration. That's a final product, and then you have to change, and it's going to be a lot more painful. And in a sense, we've done amazing things, but there's been times when it's been tough, and we've had to get back and almost lose all that work, all that time that was spent doing something so polished, and say, well, we have to get back to the drawing board and do something different because this is not what we were looking for, and that's something that happens, and that's why having that scientific mind that you always mention and experimenting and iterating, I think is absolutely central and fundamental when creating almost any product that you wanna show to other people.
Well, if you listen to my podcast, my Getting to Alpha podcast, you'll see that when I interview game designers, they talk about this a lot. They talk about the importance of iteration. But the other thing that I think, holds people back from doing this effectively is it's not just, let's iterate. There's a structured, staged approach to it. And the way I think of it, and the thing that my clients have found helpful, is to frame it as 3 stages: discovery, design, and production. Discovery is where it's scoping, it's figuring it out, it's test. If you've got several parallel ideas, you test them in a rough way, and even A/B test them. It's discovery. It's like, what are we going to build, and why are we going to build it? And then you get some data against that. That's all discovery. And then there's design, and design is a lot of iteration. Design is how do you go from what we're going to build in discovery to the exact design? There's quite a bit of iteration there, much of which should probably include some customers. And then there's production. Production is finalization. Production is, okay, we've done some testing, we've done some iteration, we're locking it. This is the UX we're shipping with. Okay, this is the feature set we're shipping with. No, we're not going to do that one. We're going to do that one. That's production. And then QA and all that stuff that you get into to ship something. And I find, especially when I work with big companies, that it's very helpful for them to have a very clear framework that they're like, okay, which phase are we in? How long does that phase take? When do we stop? So not just that we iterate, but when do we stop iterating? Because that can make them nervous to iterate. It's like, all right, this is where we do this. This is where we do this. And discovery is a lot more like a funnel. Design has iteration, it's like an iteration loop. And production is a death march. It's like, boom, you got a date. you're shipping. So they're quite different. And you see this in all the creative areas. You see the same three things in movies. You see the same three things at Pixar, you know. They call it pre-production. They call discovery pre-production. But it's really the same concept. And what I find is the more sophisticated someone is, the more important they consider pre-production or discovery, because they've learned the hard way, like me.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, we've had a fantastic talk about this, but I wanted to go into the next question, and this one we'll have to go about it a bit quicker. And I would like to, and I know it's an exciting one to talk about as well, but we'll have to go a bit faster on this answer. And it's, what's the biggest challenge that you've faced and actually solved using your process, using game thinking?
Well, there's been several. One of the ones that I'm most proud of is using game thinking with Happify, which is the leading mental health app. And that process was very difficult and challenging, which it often is. But we started with an idea, two people, two serial entrepreneurs, an idea, one paragraph written down. And we went through getting the project funded and then figuring out what it should be. And what it should be was very, very different than what the creators had originally envisioned it. And we got to that because of iterative customer feedback. And the process of doing it was incredibly gratifying because it enabled the team to pivot into success with data rather than opinions, but to do it with qualitative data, filtered in the right way.
That sounds like a very, very exciting and very successsuccessful challenge that you had and that you faced. And we can see Happify anywhere around right now, right?
That's right. Go check it out. In fact, they've branched out into corporate healthcare that's actually prescribed by doctors because it's been so successful.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, Happify is the hottest company you've never heard of. Totally, check it out.
I will, I promise.
Just one more thing. The other thing that was incredibly successful about that for me personally, which is something I always look for, is I learned a tremendous amount on that project.
Yeah, because I feel that the projects that you face, your area of expertise is on that design phase and on all those stages that you go through, but you're not necessarily an expert in what the app itself is doing. So that's a very interesting process, and it's a very interesting job to have because you learn from so many interesting things.
Exactly. I learned a ton about the science of happiness because I had to help build the app, and I'm leveraging all of it now. It's amazing.
Fantastic.
It's cumulative.
Fantastic. And Amy, we've been talking about the process, and we've been going around this question for quite a few minutes. So I would like to know what's the process of game thinking? I've heard it many times in your podcast. I'm a complete fan of your podcast. I think I have listened to every single episode by now. But I would like for the audience as well to get an idea and get a taste of what your process looks like in game thinking.
Sure. Well, if you want a detailed overview, go to gamethinking.io, first of all, and we go into a lot of detail. So there are 3 pivotal ideas, and I want to focus on those, and really 3 sections, and then a lot more detail to it. But the 3 pivotal ideas are, 1, finding and leveraging your superfans. Superfans is a word that I use to mean high value, high need early customers. And what I've learned about innovation, both in games and products and schools, is that you can identify your target audience, and that's powerful. But when you're bringing an innovative new idea to life, if you put energy up front into finding a small, high-need group of customers who are articulate enough to give you great feedback on rough, early versions of your product, you will massively increase your ability to deliver engagement using those customers as a proxy. So those are called superfans. So one of the areas of game thinking that is spelled out in great detail in the processes is how you find and identify and surface insights from and get value from superfans versus target customers. So that's one key idea. The second idea is to drive sustained engagement with a coherent and compelling path to mastery. And what that means is, as a learning professional, you know this, you live this, which is what people are inherently built to want to get better at something they care about. It's one of the fundamentals of self-actualization, and many psychological theories, and it's what education's built on.
Absolutely.
So, yes, so that is also a core of what games are built on. And it has nothing to do with detailed mechanics. It has to do with what is the story that your customer is telling themselves in their head that they're the hero of, that they're getting better at something they care about. So let's take Slack as an example. Slack is game-like, but not gamified at all. And it's game-like in the sense that you get better at something that matters by using Slack. And the thing you're getting better at isn't using Slack, although you get better at customizing Slack. There's a very coherent through line to Slack, which is make it more and more and more and more customized to you, all the way up to integrate your app into their ecosystem. But as a person, you use Slack to make you better at communicating with your team. And if Slack delivers that to you, you love Slack and you go deeper into it because it's making you better at something you care about, something in the real world that you care about, some skill you care about, it can be relatedness, some relationships you care about. So it gives you knowledge that you care about. It develops some skill you care about. And if you have that as the core of your experience that you're delivering, good design means creating a coherent and compelling mastery path that helps your customer get better at the thing they care about, the thing they came there to get better at. So that's the second big idea and that goes beyond games, but it's in every really good game. That mastery path.
In the good ones.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crap games out there. Just making something a game doesn't make it good.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the other thing that, as a game designer, is just so funny, is like, there's so many bad games, and they're not compelling. So why would you emulate that? I've had a lot of failure in my work life, and I've also had success. I've worked on 6 or 7 massive, innovative, worldwide hits that created their own genres, and then 40, 50, 60 that weren't, right? So I got to see what was different about those hits. And that's a lot of what's in game thinking. Every one of them highly leveraged a very narrow slice of superfans who were not their target audience. Every one of them thought about and really thought through a coherent path to mastery, but then, punchline, also created a simple, stripped down learning loop as step 1. And how did they do that? Through iterative playtesting. And this is what game designers call finding the fun. So the third big leg of this 3-legged stool is the right kind of iterative playtesting. Teaching thinking like a scientist, but doing it in the form that a designer or, a builder does. And it's the same form that architects use, that movie makers use. It's not made up. It's a very solid form. But you use that form and you treat it scientifically, meaning there's, many ideas at first. You're not too attached to any one idea. And if you find out that idea is wrong, you tweak. But you have an overall vision of where you're headed. So it's very much like tacking. You have a destination, but you're tacking. And if the winds really change, you might change your destination.
That makes a lot of sense. I actually last year when you had your Game Thinking Live, I will link this in the show notes. I wrote a quick blog post about some of the things that I learned from your process that I think are very, very and directly applicable to anybody in the education or in the learning space. And Amy, I have heard, and I'm following your book launch very closely. I've heard it's going to be somewhere around May. It's something I'm very, very excited about, I have to say it, because Again, I've been following your work. As I mentioned before, I love your podcast. I have listened probably to every episode that has come up until now. I was following your Game Thinking Live as much as I could because time constraints are also a thing. And I know that there's many things. I said some very briefly in my blog post, but there's many more things that are applicable to something that I'm very passionate about, and it's engagement in education, which I think there is a big crisis in engagement in education, and it's something that solving that crisis solves many other problems that are coming up in our educational system, whether it's high schools, preschools, middle schools, university, master's degrees, etc. So, Amy, I would like to know if you have a final date, if you have a final estimate when your book is coming up, and I would like you to invite, of course, your audience to check it out, see what else they can find out about your book and about the launch whenever they listen to this.
Awesome. Right now, May 31st is the date it should be available on Amazon, both here and internationally. It'll be available both in paperback and Kindle. And so you can read it, get a physical book or get a digital version. And so May 31st, if you go to gamethinking.io, there should be a big announcement that'll show you how to find out more about the book. It's going to be available for pre-order soon, but right now we actually have a early bird list where you can read excerpts from the book, including the intro in chapter 1. Right away, instantly. So if you can find out about all of that on gamethinking.io.
Fantastic. And I will link this as well in the show notes so that the engagers, the audience of this podcast can find out more. And we will leave it as a call to action, definitely, from this podcast. And now, Amy, I wanted to move to this, what we call the second part of our interviews, and these are short form, quick fire, rapid fire questions that we're going to make. And the first one is if there would be like one thing that you could say that any game thinking project would benefit from doing, if there's any best practice that you would say, well, if you do this will increase your chances of success, what would that be?
Start by doing a strategy canvas to get really clear on your assumptions up front. Start by crystallizing and prioritizing your most basic and fundamental assumptions.
Fantastic, because once you see those are assumptions and are not necessarily facts, you will be able to test them out. Isn't that right?
Exactly.
Amy, what's your favorite game?
Right now, Just Dance, because I can do it with my daughter, and it's really fun, and it gets me exercise, and it's just incredibly well done. Fantastic.
Just Dance. Amy, is there anybody you were recommended very recently by David Mullich? David Mullich, sorry, is his last name. Is there anybody that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
Dan Cook.
Dan Cook, yes.
I don't know if you know Dan Cook.
I don't know him, but I've followed a bit his work, and it seems like a very, very, very good guest could be for
and also Ralph Koster.
Yes, I just bought his book and I want to read it. I've heard so many recommendations, and I definitely want to read it.
Raf's book, A Theory of Fun, is so fundamental, and Raf and I are very like-minded. We're longtime colleagues. He's gone off in amazing directions I haven't, and vice versa, but we're longtime colleagues, and his book was very influential on me. Dan Cook writes the Lost Garden blog, and Raf and I have been trying to get Dan to write a book, but Dan also runs an indie game studio, and he is one of the most thoughtful and just cogent and interesting thinkers about multiplayer gaming, co-op gaming, how community works in gaming. He's taught me so much, and both of them are really mentors to me, as well as colleagues. So those are two people that I've learned a ton from.
That makes a lot of sense. And we've spoken about a few books by now, but aside from, of course, your book, which is coming up on May 31st, which book would you recommend to the engagers?
One thing that comes to mind, it's a little further out there, but I found it incredibly interesting and thought-provoking, is Kevin Kelly's latest book, which I'm blanking on the term, but I think it's called The Inevitable. But it had 12 trends that he sees as inevitable. And it really opened up my mind. In terms of books for engagers, I would read Raf's book.
Definitely.
I really would. And then Kathy Sierra is also someone, I don't know if she's still doing interviews. She's also been very influential on me, a totally like-minded leader. I really learned a lot from her. And she talks about, she has a quote called, upgrade your user, not your product. She worked a lot with enterprise product people. And she's got books called the Head First series that are wonderful. But they're not so much, they're just useful if you're a programmer. I would, in terms of engagement, I think that like books like Raf's they transcend gaming. And they really capture the essence of what makes a game engaging. And Raf's quote is, fun is learning, basically. Fun is guided learning.
Yeah.
I forget the exact quote again.
And learning is definitely fun. And that's what we have to make sure we don't strip away from learning, because it's what happens sometimes in many places. And that's something that's fundamental.
Exactly.
It's been a topic that's been coming up in the last episodes, and it's definitely true. We have to make sure we don't strip it away, because one of the most fun things that very small kids do is they have fun understanding the world and learning new things. And that's something we want to make sure we don't take away from future generations. Exactly.
And I think the key takeaway regarding game thinking, which is absolutely, the way Raf thinks, the way Dan thinks, is that the fun isn't in the mechanics. The fun is in the core activities. The mechanics support that. So as a learning professional, that's something that if you understand and you design from the core activities and from the mastery path on up, rather than sprinkling mechanics onto whatever is already there, that's how you deliver on the fun.
Absolutely.
The fun is in getting better at something you care about.
Yeah, and that self-driven I care about is fundamental. It's not trivial to understand that side, that it has to be something that you actually care about. Amy, what would you say is your superpower in game thinking? What's your sweet spot?
Synthesizing and communicating actionable frameworks.
Wow. That's synthesized and very well communicated for sure.
I've been labeled by other people as that from pretty early in my career. And I've been somebody who crosses boundaries. And, when I was in college and grad school, I was very interdisciplinary. My practice right now is 70% overseas. I have a very boundary crossing persona and just, gift, I guess. And so what I found is when I'm able to do that and then synthesize like a step-by-step process, a framework that other people can make their own and really live inside of and tweak themselves, it's very empowering. And that's my gift. And that's what I'm doing. And that's what my upcoming book is.
Fantastic. Amy, we're going to make now a quick random question from the audience. I don't know what exactly the question is going to be. I did pre-filter them to make sure they make sense for you as a guest. And we're going to check it out here. Okay. This one is not about game thinking, but it's about game-based learning, which I do think is something that could be in your plate as well. And the question is, what is the best way to get skeptics to understand that there is power in using games for learning? Games, game thinking, etc.
Right. That's such a great question. I think that there are there's a very practical thing that I've seen. So let me just give a very practical answer to that. Right now at my daughter's school, my husband and I have instigated family math night. And last night was family math night. And the first time we did it, 5 people showed up. Last night, 70 people showed up. Wow. And you know what it was? It was a bunch of games and puzzles and toys. That's what family math night is. It was pattern blocks for the kindergartners and Prime Climb, which is the game that like 3rd through 5th graders adore, and building games and all that stuff. And so I think that a great way for people to understand the power of games is to have a pleasurable experience where the light bulb goes on in their own head and they can engage with games and their child. Or for instance, the principal of the school was there last night and she was like, this is really grown. This is really catching on. I'm going to put some funding toward this for next year.
Fantastic. That's fantastic, and that it's the best. I'm guessing that the best way in the end to convince people of the power of all these techniques and all these things that we can use to improve and to make education and learning amazing is by showing the power that it has. It's by showing that there's many things that can be achieved, and that's exactly what you did, and that's how you got to convince the principal and why those 70 people showed up to Math Night.
And start small. The other lesson is don't be afraid to start small. In fact, it's a really good technique to start small and under the radar so you can kind of work it out and figure out what's going to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Amy Jo Kim. The final question that we have is if there's any final advice that you have for our listeners, especially those who have never used these kinds of techniques in their lives or in their teaching. How can we connect with you? Of course, remember the dates for the book, etc. Where's the webpage? If we can connect with you on social media, and then we'll say it's game over.
Great. So Amy Jo Kim, my full name, on Twitter is a great way to connect with me. That's where I share things regularly. You can find out about the book. You'll find out about webinars that I run, free educational webinars, all kinds of good stuff. So Amy Jo Kim on Twitter. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for Amy Jo Kim. The book is May 31st. Go to gamethinking.io. And in terms of advice, I just want to reiterate, show, don't tell. Don't be afraid to start small. Make something that you know isn't good enough and get someone to collaborate with you and help you make it better.
The best way to engage somebody else is to get them involved.
Exactly.
Love it. Love it. Thank you very much, Amy Jo Kim. This has been a fantastic interview. I hope the engagers get a lot of value from all of the things that you've been sharing. And it's time to say game over.
It's been a pleasure.
Hey, engagers. Thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. And if you want more interviews with incredible guests like Amy Jo Kim, then please go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started into our email list. That way we can be in contact and you'll be the first to know of any opportunities that Professor Game might have for you. I'll be waiting for you next week with another incredible guest. See you there.